What is up, all you crabby boys and buggy girls? Welcome to The World is My Burrito, a podcast where I alter the digital structure of the ribonucleic acid, RNA for short, allowing me to fuse it with bugs and mammals and cephalopods and crustaceans. Oh god, the cephalopods and crustaceans. So that I may create the most eclectic and delectable burrito for your eating pleasure. Today is August 12th, 2024, and we are covering the first 18 volumes, or the first arc, of the still ongoing manga Terraformars by writer Yu Sasuga and artist Kenichi Tachibana. Nothing special has really happened on my end of the podcast, so let's just move right into the synopsis. In an attempt to colonize Mars, 21st century scientists are tasked with terraforming the planet. Their goal is to seed the planet with a modified algae to absorb sunlight and purify the atmosphere, and cockroaches whose corpses spread the algae across the planet as they feed, breed, and die. 500 years later, the first crewed ship to Mars lands, and its 6 crew members are attacked by giant mutated humanoid cockroaches with incredible physical strength, later labeled Terraformars. The crew is wiped out after sending a warning back to Earth. 2 years later, Bugs 2, a multinational expedition of genetically modified humans, is sent to collect 10 samples of both sexes of roaches and exterminate the mutated bugs to take control of the Red Planet. Only 2 survivors manage to return to Earth, one swearing to return and avenge their fallen companions. As a third expedition is assembled, questions are raised about the true origin of the Terraformars and their connection with an unknown disease affecting mankind, the alien engine virus, or AE virus. To fight the Terraformars' strength and agility, members of the third expedition undergo genetic modification to inherit the characteristics of other organisms, only possible after having a special organ implanted. Hot take, I do not like this anime or manga and would only recommend it if you really love having your action and drama constantly interrupted by everything. Literally everything. Volume 1 is great. Volume 2 is okay, but my first note of confusion about the storytelling is in Volume 3. And honestly, one of the reasons why this took so long to do, I had most of this written probably easily within the first 2 weeks of preparing for this episode. Like, it took about a week to watch everything and read everything, and, about another week to get most of this written. And then I was kind of slowly going back and trying to change things. This whole episode is really me just shitting on this. And like the last probably week and change, between being busy, there was still time that I could have done this, but it's like, do I really want to release an episode where I am essentially just shitting on something the entire time? Yeah, it's been long enough. I really need to, because I know mentally I'm going to be hung up until I do this. The anime and the manga aside, I am still very interested in watching the live action movie directed by Takashi Miike, because he can do no wrong. If you've ever seen his works before, it's one of those that, like, it's either amazing or it's just done perfectly bad. Like, not even accidentally. It's like he knows how to make something bad and you just love it. Personal history and why I chose this topic. Well, it has Mars in the name, and it's popular. And I started the anime years ago, so I figured, why not? And then learned, why not? Originally, and I had to check because I knew that I had started the anime years ago and stopped it pretty quickly. And so when I get back into it, it's like, man, I wonder how far I got. I got halfway through the second episode before quitting, because I was just like, this is terrible. And now, years later, and when I started this, I think it was fresh. I think it was a brand new anime. So years later, it's like, man, was it really that bad? Yeah, it really was. I see why I quit halfway through the second episode. But for this preparation, I watched all of season 1 of the anime on Crunchyroll before going to the manga. There is a season 2 out there, but Crunchy doesn't have it. And I didn't feel like sailing the seas after how god-awful the first 13 episodes were. There's not a whole lot of ingredients. Let's move on with the creator history. We only know that Yu, the writer, was born in 1988. Good year. Terraformars is the only thing to his name, and it is crazy how little info there is on him. Meanwhile, Tachibana, the artist, born sometime in 1977, has 2 Manga Grand Prix awards and an honorable mention. He's worked on a couple of series and one-shots before finally landing on Terraformars. I could have said more, but the first award was for a dojin, so it seemed like stopping there was probably the best decision before giving a bunch of recommendations. Manga history. Terraformars is an adventure slash horror slash sci-fi created for the seinen or young adult demographic, which began printing in Miracle Jump between January 2011 through December of the same year, totaling 6 chapters. Afterwards, it moved to weekly Young Jump and ran pretty strong through March 2017 when Yu came down with an illness. He hopped back on in April of 2018, knocked out a few chapters, then went back on hiatus due to the same sickness. Earlier this year, its return was announced to begin at the end of June. I was supposed to release this last month, and here we are. Right now, the main story is at 226 chapters across 22 volumes. There are some one-shots and short side stories out there, so the printed franchise is around 240 chapters total. And now for a little bit on the anime history. Season 1 of the anime ran from September 27th, 2014 through December 20th, 2014 with 13 episodes. Season 2, also known as Terraformars The Revenge, ran from April 2nd, 2016 through June 25th, 2016, also covering 13 episodes. There are some pretty stark differences in stylistic approach between seasons 1 and 2, but apparently Light and Film animated both. Let's get into the meat of it with that spoiler warning. If you don't want this, now was his time to warn his people. Burrito spoiled. Throughout the ages on planet Earth, in the country of Mexico, there is still dispute about the usage of the word burrito. Then find a nice Tupperware. It was originally a regional term stemming from Guanajuato, Guerrero, Michoacan, San Luis Potosi, and Sinaloa. With a good seal, the original word was still taco throughout the rest of Mexico, but in modern times may be referred to as tacos de harina. Maybe wrap it in some aluminum foil, now popularly used across the United States of America. So you can throw it in a toaster oven or on a nice cast iron griddle when you're ready. It has found a meaning of its own, and that meaning is kill cockroaches. To get it nice and crispy without leaking any juice. I kid you not, that is the entirety of the anime and most of the manga, and that is at its most comprehensible. The meat. This is a very normal shonen story with an edgelordy seinen edge. That is, it is a child story with barely an adult's approach. I'm mostly going to focus on the manga, but, we'll do a quick start with the anime. Most of the people listening to this are probably creatives, be it audio, video, photos, graphic design, metalworking, woodworking, whatever. If you got into the medium when you were much younger, you likely went through the gamut of filters available in your first app. Distorted video filters, funky audio filters, flashy transitions, etc. Or various tools and techniques if you worked with something physical. There was probably a point where you applied more than one filter, tool, or technique to a single project because you thought it was cool. You're new to this. The endless possibilities have completely absorbed you. Down the line, you learn that there is a limit to what should be done at once. Maybe don't use the dozen filters in one digital project, and maybe don't use every jointing technique on a single cabinet. The sweet spot of form, function, and general artistry often means you work much harder to do less, not more. Like the best of the photos that I've ever photoshopped look the least edited. The photos I have that have the most photoshopping done to them are the ones that look the least edited. So if you look at my stuff, you'll see I like to do a lot of wild stuff. That's easy. It's when you have to bring something, like repair something back into realism, or fix something with skin tones or lighting or makeup or something. That's where it requires the real effort, and that's the stuff that you're not supposed to notice. So yeah, I can put tons and tons and tons of effort into something that just comes out looking beautiful but extremely normal. The anime straight up abuses the free filters in whatever video software they were using. It's actually kind of an insult to say that an animation studio worked on this. It's an insult to like the artistry of anime. It is not used sparingly or selectively. It's wild with filters, hard cuts, audio crossing from scene to scene to the point where you don't even know who's talking anymore. People will be in the middle of a fight, hard cut to a few seconds of backstory, hard cut back to the fight. It honestly feels like a 14-year-old's first project. And this came after the manga. This is where I'll leave the anime, but you'll see a theme when I break down the manga. So first of all, I want to talk about the stakes. In general, the stakes are always so high. But it quickly reaches this point where the stakes are so high that high stakes are the low bar, so being high is just what it is. This is listed as a horror, and there is a lot of deception, but you always know that either something bad is about to happen if things are going well, or something good is about to happen if they're going bad. And you may be thinking to yourself, Corey, that's how storytelling works. And you'd be mostly right. But this is like the original G.I. Joe cartoon, giving you whiplash with all the good and bad occurring page by page. Many of the resolutions are very uninspired. Then every so often you'll get one that's just like out of left field. Alternatively, when bad things happen, they're never that bad and end in a very immediate resolution, or they just kill off characters we don't know about or barely care about, leaving no impact. Now, Jose and Shaggy, you may also be saying, but Corey, the stakes in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure are identical in that there is always a quick resolution. And you'd mostly be right. Except the whole show is quintessentially so dumb yet extreme that you're always looking forward to whatever bullshit Araki pulls out of his ass. And it's always some wild thing that you could never have imagined. Whereas Terraformars is always more medicine. And JoJo's does this thing where everything is given a chance to breathe. Terraformars is just, oh, it's bad. Oh, it's good. Oh, it's bad. Oh, it's worse. Oh, it's fine. Just page after page. I'm also deducting JoJo points because no male with the physique of a Roman god ever wears a thong with a dick flap. If you know, you know. The medicine is the next point. The crux of the story is the medicine needed to turn these people into their animal forms. But right off the bat, these roaches invade the Annex 1, the ship that everyone's on, make a beeline for the cargo hold, then destroy their vast supply of transformation medicine, leaving only the backup. This is volume 3. And yet not only do these 100 passengers have plenty of medicine remaining, they have shitloads. Plenty of people use multiple at once or pass multiple needles to someone who runs out. At no point in time is there ever a lack of medicine. The organ transplant. Nobody in the story has failed the organ transplant. There is so much dialogue about how difficult it is, but in the 18 volumes I read, there's never a failure. We're only shown successes. In the beginning, we're given the trio of friends, Alex, Marcos, and Sheila. So much focus is put on them and the 36% pass rate. You totally laid the groundwork for one of them to die, then abandon it, instead choosing to kill off Sheila in an otherwise dull part of the story. This is only a problem later when they continue to not shut up about the 36%. Injuries. Have you ever watched Demon Slayer? I'm sure most of those listening haven't seen this. So the MCs, the main characters, can get the absolute shit beat out of them, get every bone in their body broken, have no access to Senzu beans or Dragon Balls, and then somehow they're just kind of perpetually okay enough to keep going. That's this. That's Terraformars. The people who are genetically mixed with cephalopods and crustaceans have an excuse with the healing factor, but beyond that, there is no healing medicine in this story. You openly speaks to the depth of injury and how certain people don't have healing factors, but it never matters. Much, much, much later in the story, you randomly decides they should probably offhandedly mention something like a healing medicine and then just ignores that too. Sleep. Sleep is one of the few things the anime did far better than the manga by addressing its necessity on the battlefield early on. But in the manga, these people just keep going for days on end before thinking about it. I would accept a BS reason like they don't need sleep, except Yu feels the need to mention how a lack of sleep can negatively affect them before ignoring it. And I'll move on to main point number 2, which was the interruptions. This is probably the most important of all topics because of how pervasive it is. This manga might only reach 60 chapters if they removed the unnecessary backstory, scientific data, engineering data, etc. And I don't have any inherent problem with any of those things. The problem is when that hard data constantly fills up pages to make up for what isn't there, like any character or story depth. In the previous episode, I mentioned that Alita Mars Chronicle rides out a lot of quote-unquote unnecessary details, then provides you with a whole section of info at the end, or very neatly tucked away footnotes at the bottom of a page. It does not interfere with whatever is currently happening. Somewhere along the lines, Yu seems to have figured out that kind of Alita formula in the wrong way. Instead of completely moving biological information about an animal to its own page, he continues to fill action sequences with info and still dedicates one full page to even more random info that was only excluded previously because it doesn't actually have anything to do with anything. It's just literally like other neat info about this creature. Speech and bubble, style and placement are the even greater offenders here in this interruptive thing. It should be a crime to stack so many internal monologues, thoughts, book quotes, conversations, and narration across so many individual pages. But if you're going to do it, at least use decades-old methods of keeping track. One of the easiest ways to keep track of what text belongs to what is by assigning a specific font style, speech box style, or combo for each individual one. I'm sure you've seen an example of someone speaking in person to someone on the phone. The first person text box is round with regular font, while the phone text box is square, maybe has little electric flourishes on a corner or two with italic font. And while this manga does that, it's like each page is on some kind of randomizer. There was one point where a very noticeable font was chosen to indicate narration on one page, but on the next it was internal dialogue. And I'm confident this happened a few times, but had been attributing previous offenses to Japanese quirks. If you've read enough or watched enough stuff, the Japanese have like quirky ways of kind of doing really weird dialogue sometimes. But now, like I said, I'm pretty certain this was just like terrible choice of font and speech box, where like it truly was someone saying something, a totally different person saying a totally different thing on the next page, but it looked identical to someone speaking on the previous page. Main point 3, the timing. The timing of everything is usually terrible. The first thing that stood out to me is Liu's backstory after he dies. It combines his tragic childhood upbringing with his adult motivations. All we learn in the end is the guy who was a traitor to the cause was also a traitor to the treacherous cause. And all of this after the guy's dead. That's not depth, that's the oily film on top of your morning coffee. There's supposed to be a huge reveal nearing the very end of the Mars story that Joe, the number one strongest dude in the entire bunch, who missed most of the story, actually put the roaches inside the annex in the beginning of the story. Which does not matter. It does not affect anything. Those roaches barely killed anyone, and the ones they did kill weren't high enough ranking, nor were they absolutely necessary to the mission. They didn't reveal any captain's abilities, and they didn't even take down the ship. The overwhelming number of roaches that attacked the ship upon entering the atmosphere happened without Joe's interference. The crash and events afterwards were always going to happen. On top of that, he was never actively doing anything underhanded. His first secretive action had no real impact, and then suddenly he turns on the very people he was fighting alongside for a couple of chapters. It tells us after the fact that Joe is an asshole, then gives the backstory iterating Joe has always been an asshole, which we already know. It tells us that his team were basically clones or something, which doesn't matter because we never meet them or his team until so late in the story. He kills a few captains, but fails in the end. And this does kind of go on into the second part. I'm sure it does not matter. If you want to create a good villain, at least have them doing something all the time. One of my favorite villains is the Russian in From Russia with Love, the James Bond movie. He's always foiling Bond's plans from afar, posing as a friend, posing as another agent, and only meets Bond in person at the end. Like, that to me is a perfect subversive villain where there's always something kind of happening. People wondering, why are these plans failing? And then you attribute it to the bad guy or the surprise bad guy. Like, they yeah, you don't have to show physically doing the thing, which I'm certain you is incapable of that. You just have to make that reveal where it's like all these independent things were going on because of Joe's influence. Something else that would have been fun under different circumstances is the anti-Terraformar vibrating ninja sword, introduced in the 8th or ninth volume. It is the wildest weapon that comes out of nowhere. Then afterwards, we get a flashback about its storage on the ship, and an unnecessary explanation of its abilities. Like, this is yet another great example of something that could have been hinted at in volume 2 or 3, then rewarded in volume 8. It's like Chekhov using the gun before introducing it. That's not how it works. So that's kind of it for the main points. I have, like another entire section of things I didn't like, but stuff that I didn't like that wasn't yet organized into like chunks. But I'll give you kind of an example of the storytelling and just how awful it becomes. And it really does become worse and worse as this continues. So there are two characters in a car, male and female. The guy's asking the girl about dinner. She rejects him and brings up the time they went to a batting range, which somehow led to her hearing about an NFL scout who went to Saitama, Japan, and found a beast of a kid who was scouted for a shitload of money. He turned it down and volunteered for Ichi Security, which is the Earth defense force against roaches. Then she goes into describing the Earth ranking system and how the scouted kid isn't related to Joe. We get about 2 pages of a break, then have to learn about the engineering of Tokyo Tower, the makeup of a microwave pulse bomb, more Tokyo Tower facts, the history of the god of silkworms, to a combo of history of Annex 1 and Where Are They Now, including the people who we just learned where they were in this volume with previous information. This all takes 37 pages, and only 5 have nothing to do with information. And the thing that I didn't tell you is throughout like all of this, there's someone trying to bomb Tokyo Tower, and they're trying to show this guy being the one that joined the security force. So and that's like the 5 pages. They're interrupting all of what this guy's doing just to tell you about the god of silkworms. And inevitably, like, one of the things that is done so frequently, and I think I hated it this so much, was there would be this long monologue, and they'll be like, we only have one purpose: to kill cockroaches. And that was in here too, and it's like, why are we doing this again? I think the other thing is I'm a little offended that there are like separate stories to this. Like, I do not think Yu is a good writer. I think he's terrible at like actual storytelling. Um, it's not something I'm ever going to look any further into. I read some, comments online where people were saying how you clearly had all of this stuff planned from the beginning, which honestly makes him an even worse writer if he has to wait till the end of something to tell you about things that happened at the beginning for characters that would never seemingly do that thing. And then you have to just like come up with this lore. It feels like it is constantly fighting itself over what is real and what is fake. The manga, as for likes, I can say that the manga has pretty drawings when we get them. The anime does not. I cannot in good conscience say that the anime looks good. And it's not to say that the art is terrible, it's that the art is never on the screen long enough for you to give a shit. Like, you could pull singular stills, but at any given time, you're talking about like seconds, just seconds of something that's really cool, interrupted by characters who are just talking or like cutting back to earth or something. So I can't even say that I like the animation. Yeah, lot of shitting on this one. Resource material for this was the Terraformars wiki. Crunchyroll had an article about the official return announcement. Yeah, no Wikipedia because it was absolutely useless this time around. And I had considered looking a little bit more into you. He's done interviews and stuff. They're not like super blatantly obvious to find, especially for something like the Terraformars wiki links nothing this guy's ever said or done. But I hated this. It is so bad. Go watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like, if you want something that's going to interrupt itself, at least that's entertaining, and it's stupid, and it's marvelous storytelling. Moving on to Nacho Business. Yeah, some of the other stuff that's kept me from this, finally getting back into some photo work. I'm about to hit, like, September is going to be busy as hell because I have a bunch of conventions to shoot and should have some Halloween stuff going on. One of the things that I finally got into after 3 years was Pokemon Unite, the Pokemon MOBA for the Switch and mobile. I just gotten a bug to start watching League of Legends professional matches again. And then, it's like this, like adulterous thing of, like reaching out to an ex or something, or seeing if you can still find your ex, I should say, because I did check to see if my League account still existed, and thankfully it does not. It didn't get wiped out on their first wave of account deletions, but it got wiped out on the second one a couple of years ago. So I got into Pokemon Unite. It's a hell of a lot of fun. It's very quick. I'd highly recommend it. If you have been deep into the MOBA scene, but absolutely hate it because it is kind of a shitty environment to be in, I would still recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's very quick. From turning the Switch on till ending a match, you're looking at like 15 minutes. No more than 15 minutes. Just on an episode of the Neatcast, which will release next week. So look for that. It's going to be one of the few semi-serious episodes that they'll have this year. I just watched Dream Scenario yesterday with Nick Cage, and that is absolutely amazing. If you've seen it and liked it, I highly recommend the comic Memetic. You should look that up. It's if you like the concept of Dream Scenario, I think you'll like what Memetic does. And if you haven't seen Dream Scenario, really go watch it. It is a stellar kind of discussion about memes and popularity. And one of the other things that's definitely kind of stopped me from doing this is doing a bunch of reading for a future episode. I'm trying to knock out a couple of books um, for October. We'll see. Next episode's going to be Carol and Tuesday. That one shouldn't take long because I think I'll really enjoy it. I think there'll be a lot more facts behind it. I still feel a little bit bad that I don't, as much as I shit on Terraformars, I didn't say enough positive stuff about Alita Mars Chronicles, and I feel sort of bad about that episode, but I'm not going to re-record it. Um, but it was great, and I feel like I should. It was constantly like going into detail about how much I hated Terraformars made me realize how little detail I went about what I actually liked about Alita. So that's where I'm like feeling bad. Kind of a disservice to the 8 people who listen to this, but I still appreciate you listening. Yeah, we're at the end now. Have you experienced Terraformars before? If so, what did you think of it? It has a ungodly high rating online. I've already had my Dragon Ball Z. Like, I can get kids liking it, but if you've been watching anime forever, if you're new to anime, kid or otherwise, yes, but it's just a worse Dragon Ball Z. Yeah, be it on this topic or anything whatsoever, you can find me on social media at Twinbee Podcast. Yeah, Instagram, God, you name it, Threads, Twitter, all of them. I have an account on everything. Do I use it? If you message me, I'll probably use it. Or you can email me at twinbeepodcast@gmail.com. But yeah, thanks for listening to this roast roach.